about Orcas a little bit. They have their pod call, which is the call that identifies their pod. For Orca is very important. Being so social and community-oriented, to have that presence of where each member of the pod is in every moment. The way that they communicate is that they receive the call, or what in humans would be repeating it as saying, I heard you, I understood you, and here is my response. In the first act, we'd like to introduce this family structure of communication for Orcas. You have to have a robust ocean happening for us to understand that this family is coming in. So when that was built, we had the pod coming around the room, and they're going to situate, and then it's going to be possible for the audience to hear their communication pattern and understand, get familiar also with their family call. For us, it's difficult to perceive the wide range of communication that they use, but this is a good glimpse of it, I think. And of course, there is the part of the captivity. When you have such a clear family call, when you have such a clear pattern of communication, with these animals being able to process sound information in their brains so fast, any reflection that comes back with the same information from the walls becomes a repeat of that call that they process, and they think, there may be someone from my family in this space. But no, they quickly, of course, realize that it's a completely different situation, which most of the times is alien to them. That's what we can imagine and try to display here. But yeah, understanding the sensitivity they have to sound and how powerful the processing capabilities are for this information is something that needs to continuously be explored, and of course be a tool to understand that when these animals are in confined spaces, that has a big impact on their sonic environment, and this becomes really unhealthy really quickly. Then the second act is the technically most challenging, which is the tank, which is a short part, quite intense, that displays the conditions of that change of environment completely. Their voices are carried for kilometers in the wild. So any reduction of that space is already a lot of impact for them. Distorted as well, the diffraction on how the sound is incident over the walls and how it returns the shape of each tank. As soon as you think a little bit about it, it's a really unfair situation for an animal that it does so many things through sound, being deprived from their main sense by all that feedback of reflections that the walls themselves feedback to the animal every time that there is any sound emitted. So all the vibrations from the engines for cleaning tanks, all the vibration from the music of the show from outside, applauses, people banging on the glass of the tanks. There is so many noise pollution that we don't even observe in our day-to-day lives. But when you are in a water tank, that becomes really overwhelming, I imagine. So yeah, that's Orcas.
I'm always inspired by the physicality of sound. So when we think of sound as something which is tangible, that relates to your body, that relates to a space in general, so the more phenomenology of sound, so how we perceive a space mentally as opposed to the acoustic reaction, the perceptual factors of space determine how we interpret the sound and how it relates then to the visceral connection, so like how it connects to our body after. That's definitely part of the research, like how do you translate that? Because you're always, it's of course all based on like as much calculations as are known about this subject and trying to implement that. At the same time, you have to make a lot of translations, as you did with like the space, for instance, like modeling the space to human proportions, but also like for instance with frequencies. So maybe frequencies that are almost soothing to us can be very frustrating or extremely anxious for orcas. So we have to think about how can you take that frequency range and put it in a range also that is more present and anxious for humans, so that you get that same feeling, that same physical reaction, basically.
Yeah, we've been working on the tank part mainly this weekend.
You have the physical tank here, and then it's divided into different pickup points per surface.
Yeah.
And then for each part of the surface we have a different sound file, which is calculated based on the reflection of the material. The first reflection times are modeled into like a glass membrane.
The floor is concrete and then the four surrounding walls are glass.
But now we had like really specific demands on the software of like this acoustic modeling and this kind of idea of changing acoustic environment. It makes me aware of how complex and critical this project is, that a lot had to be kind of developed on the spot, and I think made a good choice to put the priority there because it's really central to the piece. So if you cannot communicate that feeling of being in captivity, there's no sense to compose the other parts, because it's all about that contrast of the two spaces. So there's one thing to have like a model which is based on certain acoustic properties of the maybe diffraction and the material filtering and just in general how a sound would propagate in these conditions and then under the condition of the water. But the other thing is to be able to compose with it. And that's a very different question. It strengthens the whole mission to render this as realistically and as possible in all its complexity.
The brain structure of the orcas allow a faster processing time of information coming in and also completely different pattern. So that's also something that we can look into to create a model of this is how the room behaves and that's how far we can perceive it. But if we actually will be able to perceive all the information at the speed that the animal that's actually in that tank perceives it, this is the reality that's living.
It's a nice part of the research is like, how do you go from all those measurements, so all the really scientific data, to an embodied experience, a sonic piece? If you think, just to compare, once the orca is living in captivity, it might live there for the entirety of its life. And now we put that in 3 minutes. And after 3 minutes, everybody is released from that experience. These are complicated questions of like, how do I translate that, and how can I give that experience and give that impact of the real suffering without having to keep people for the rest of their lives in the 4D system.
At the end, we have again the endless ocean in a representation of how rich this could be to return to for those animals, how a healthy ocean could sound with just the sound of different species happening in the distance, passing by, just an alive ocean. When I look at them, I think how amazing it would be to hear like you. The word hearing and the word feeling in Catalan is the same, so which is my native language. So when you hear, you feel in Catalan. So for me to think, sentir, like to feel and hear, when I look at those pieces, that's what I feel. To think that we could be closer to what they hear and be closer to what they feel through sound, for me is an amazing idea. If I found it necessary in 2015, I found it now more necessary than ever. I see that's possible to change that and to really help to end captivity.